Hey everyone, welcome back to Life with Casey. We are right in the middle of my 4-part series on how to learn a language. And before we get started on the third part of this series, I just wanted to refresh your memory on part 1 and part 2, which you can find on my YouTube site. There's all the videos that I've created, including the first 2 parts. So just to refresh your memory, part 1 of my How to Learn a Language series was the method of taking a class at a local university to learn a language. Part 2 was to purchase a language learning software such as Rosetta Stone. And now we're going to go ahead and get started on part 3, which I'm really excited about. The third method that I'm going to teach you on how to learn a language is to participate either in an immersion program or a study abroad. Now I know what you're probably thinking. If you're like me and you're not in college anymore, you probably think that a study abroad is only for college students. You might think, I don't have the time to do that. I can't go away for a whole semester for 6 months. You also might be thinking that you don't have the money to do that, or that you're just a little apprehensive, to just pick up and go abroad. But as I'm going to go over shortly, there are many different ways outside of a university that you can still participate in an immersion program or a study abroad. So let's get right to it. So I really think, as I think a lot of other people out there also share this view, the best way to learn a language is to be completely immersed, and especially in the country where the language is spoken. As you know, you can go to a university course, which I recommend, especially for beginners, to get a base knowledge. Once you have a base knowledge of that language, when you go abroad and you hear the language spoken in the grocery store, in restaurants, you're walking down the street and you hear people speaking that language. You're interacting with people on the TV, on the radio, on the music, on the radio. Everything is in that language. Your brain starts to adapt to that language, whether you realize it or not, and you start to think, you start to dream. A lot of people say that you've reached fluency in a language when you have a dream in that language. When your brain is receiving only that language, it starts to adapt, it starts to think in that language, and that's really cool. Another great thing about going abroad or participating in an immersion program is that you get to experience more than just language. You get to experience relationships with the people in that country or in that immersion program. You get to experience culture, you get to experience cuisine, you get to experience music. And so it's not just learning a language for the language sake, it's really getting a new perspective on the world, on the countries where that language is spoken. And so I highly recommend this for anyone that's really looking to get fluent and really learn more about other people, another country, and even themselves, because a lot of people find that when they go abroad, they learn way more about themselves than they ever thought they would. So now we're going to start with talking about the different ways that you could make this happen. So the first is to travel abroad to another country with a program. And you have a few options of doing this. So there's obviously, you could partner with a local university, which already has established study abroads to a lot of different countries. You could go to your local university and see if you would be able to partner with them. They have all sorts of different time frames. So I myself participated in a Maymester study abroad to Brazil. I went for 1 month, and it was a culture and language study abroad. I also participated in a full semester study abroad that was from January to July, so that was 7 months, and it was extremely extensive, strictly on language and culture. But I know they also have maybe a 10-day study abroad where you travel abroad for about a week straight. You go to a local university and you take classes, you learn about culture. But 10 days, even if you're a working adult, most people can save up their vacation to get 10 days off. So I think that's a great opportunity. Sometimes when you're traveling abroad, and especially if you're trying to learn a language abroad and you want to have structured classes at a university, it's way easier and more beneficial to partner with a university that already has those programs established rather than to look it up for yourself. So that is the first option of traveling abroad with a university or an already established study abroad program. So there are also websites and programs and companies that specialize in sending adults abroad. They understand your schedule. They understand you're not a college student. You can't devote an entire semester to a study abroad. They understand all of the restrictions, and they tailor their study abroad programs to your specific situation. So I have a couple written down here, a couple of institutions that you could Google or look online and see if one of their programs would work for you. The one that I particularly liked was FLSAS, which is Foreign Language Study Abroad Service. So they have intensive programs either for a group or an individual setting based on your needs. They also have the options of classroom learning, or they have a cultural homestay learning where there aren't any structured classes. They can do women alone, they can do parents and children, they can do a couple, they can do men alone. So they really have their programs tailored to your needs and your intentions for learning a language, and they can provide a homestay or a university setting or a cultural experience depending on what you're looking to get out of the experience. This particular group, the Foreign Language Study Abroad Service, has study abroad programs in 40 different countries. And they also offer the different capacities either for a professional or a personal study abroad. So if you're looking to learn another language because of your job, or let's say your company has an office in that country and you want to know more about the laws and the practices and the culture along with the language, they have that specifically set up for you. Or if you're just going for personal reasons to get to know the culture, to meet people, to build relationships, to learn the language, they have that too. So I think that is a really, really great option. The Foreign Language Study Abroad Service, or FLSAS, isn't the only one of these organizations that provides these types of services. I found a bunch of different companies and organizations that offer programs just like that, so I would encourage you to Google and try and find a program in the language, in the country, in the time frame that you want, in the price range that you are able to afford. And I think that this is a great way to get your language from the basic beginner level, even if you're only there for a month. In my case, I studied Portuguese one semester in college, went to Brazil for 1 month in the month of May, and the difference between when I got there and when I left, just having spent 1 month there, was incredible. I went from a very basic beginner level to high intermediate after spending 1 month in Brazil. So I highly recommend this for a lot of you. A couple of other organizations that I did find before we move on to the next option for participating in a study abroad or an immersion program is Global Learning Adventures. This group specifically focuses on the culture and the excursions along with the languages. So just as a couple of examples, you can do studying Spanish in Peru while taking a trip to Machu Picchu. You can also study some of the Nordic languages while also seeing the Northern Lights. Or you can go into Africa and take a safari while also learning some of the African languages. So this group, Global Learning Adventures, particularly focuses on the experience. It's a little more touristy, but I also think that that's a great option for someone who maybe doesn't care about reaching a high level of fluency, but really wants the experience, the culture, the relationships. That's a great group. Okay. So the next way that we're going to talk about going on a trip abroad, especially to focus on your language, is for work. So you might not be at a multinational corporation. You might not have the ability to go abroad with your current job. But if you're in a position where you can take a bit of a risk, or you can take a year or so off of your current job, there are other jobs that will allow you to travel abroad while also working. And a few of these are teaching English abroad. One of my best friends in college, right out of college, ended up getting a job for a year teaching English in Korea through a program called Talk. And they flew her out to Korea. They paid every month a stipend for her living and for her food. And so she got to live in South Korea for a year, worked on her Korean, which is now perfect, and all of her expenses and her trip out there was paid for. And so that's a specific program in South Korea, but depending on what language you're learning or what culture really attracts you, there are other programs out there where you can teach English abroad. Another option is the Peace Corps. This might not be an ideal option for a lot of people because I know I had another friend who wanted to go to a Spanish-speaking country and ended up in Mongolia. So this might not be the best option if you want to target a specific area of the world or a specific language. But it is a job and it is a way to go abroad and to spend some time getting to learn another culture. And by the end of my friend who did go to Mongolia, by the end of the 2 years that he spent there with the Peace Corps, he was fully fluent in Mongolian, and he didn't expect it, so that was really cool. So the last option for going abroad for work is to be an au pair. I have a lot of friends that got here to the United States by being an au pair. A couple of the girls that I work with from Brazil actually got here by being an au pair. They went to Minnesota for 2 years, and they both met their current husbands, got a green card, and stayed, and now they're living here. So that could be another really great option. I looked into it after I graduated college. I was looking into going to Spain, and I know for a lot of people it doesn't provide a ton of income, but again, it pays for all of your living expenses with a stipend for food and travel. And I think some au pair opportunities pay up to $1,500 a month in addition to your living expenses, your food, and that type of thing. So that could also be another really good option for anyone who's feeling a little bit adventurous, is willing to quit their current job and to go abroad. And that is a steady source of income for at least a year. So that could be a great opportunity for work. Okay, so I've already talked about ways that you can better your language skills by going abroad through a university or another study abroad program such as FLSAS or Global Learning Adventures. I've already talked about ways that you can go abroad with a job such as teaching English abroad, going through the Peace Corps, or being an au pair. So lastly, I'm going to talk about going abroad alone. So this is a little bit scary for some people. If you just plan to go abroad, you want to plan a trip, let's say you're learning Spanish, and you just want to plan a trip. So you decide to go to Colombia. You don't want to go with a university, you don't want to pay another program or an organization to set everything up with you. When you get there, you don't want to take classes in a formal institution. You just want to go on your own, experience the culture, start up some conversations, and figure it out if you're very adventurous. I think that this is a good option for some people. It is a little bit scary. You have to do your research on the front end. But if you do this option, when you book your travel and you go, I recommend that you be as active as possible. If you go and you do the touristy things and you have a tour guide that speaks English and you're going to all of the tourist locations where there's a bunch of other English speakers or a bunch of other people that speak not Spanish, all the other languages, you're not going to be able to get as much out of your opportunity, and you might end up coming back after a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, a month, and not even being much more fluent than you were when you started. If you choose this route, you're going to have to be extremely intentional. You're going to have to force yourself to be a little bit uncomfortable and talk to the locals. Start up those conversations at the grocery store, at a restaurant, walking down the street, on the bus, in a subway. It's a little bit uncomfortable and awkward, but that's how you're going to make sure that when you go abroad, you're getting your language skills at a higher level, you're practicing, you're learning new vocabulary, you're hearing the pronunciation of the local speakers. I also think that it's extremely important to try and make friendships. Join a group. When I lived in Buenos Aires in Argentina, they had specifically a group for beginning speakers, and it wasn't through a university. It was just, I think I found it on Facebook that there was a community of people that lived in Argentina. They wanted to learn some English, and so they wanted to find native English speakers and to create a practice language group. And so we would for 30 minutes speak Spanish, for 30 minutes speak English. We'd meet once a week. We'd meet at a restaurant, we'd meet at a bar, we'd meet at a tea salon. And so it was wonderful because I got to enjoy the culture. I got to meet new people. Everyone was feeling a little bit awkward and uncomfortable because nobody knew each other, and it was one of those settings where you knew you know, you had to meet new people and you had to speak a foreign language, but that in itself helped me to build some of my friendships in Argentina, and it helped me at the very beginning to learn the local slang and the local phrases and just even hear their pronunciation to pick up on some things. So I definitely would encourage, if you want to do that, let's say that you have a really stressful job and you can only go abroad for a week. I definitely encourage you before you go to try and look up these community groups or try and find events that will force you to practice the language, to build relationships, and to get your language, even in just a week, get your language to a higher level when you leave than it was when you got there. So those are all of the options that I want to talk about going abroad to work on your language skills. There's one last option to work on your language skills without having to go abroad, and those are immersion programs. So I don't know if a lot of you know too much about this. I didn't know too much until I had a friend that did this. There are little communities all around the country, and even some in Canada, where people recreate, organizations or companies recreate a complete immersion setting. So for example, my friend wanted to learn French, and he found in Canada one of these communities. It was a complete immersion program. He paid $2,000 for 2 weeks. He packed a bag and he went and he lived in this community. They have lodging, they have food, they have everything. But from the second that you step into that community, you cannot speak English. And so he was freaked out because he didn't know French. He went there to learn French, but from the second that he stepped into the community, he could not speak English. And I'll tell you, at the end of the 2 weeks, these immersion programs, they'll have some classroom learning. They'll have cultural experiences. I have some of them written down here. One of them, it's called a language village, and this one is in Concordia, Minnesota. This particular one, you go for 1 month, and it's a simulated immersion environment, so you can't speak English. They also, so the one that I researched is for Chinese. They simulate the culture, and so they cooked Chinese food. You ate Chinese food as if you were in China. They simulated the decor. They said that there was a huge dragon on the outside of the community, and they also have classes where you learn Chinese, but it's a complete immersion setting. And so going back to my friend who wanted to learn French, at the end of the 2 weeks, I was shocked at how much French that he had learned, but you would be absolutely shocked if you thought after 2 weeks of total immersion, no English, you have to, for survival, you have to figure it out. You have to find a way to make it work, and you start picking up on words here and there, and you start picking up on patterns. And at the end of the 2 weeks, he was at a high beginner level of French, and then he went abroad. He went to France, and so his French got way better from there. And so this was a great starting point for him, and this is a really great option for a lot of you that either maybe aren't as adventurous, you don't want to go abroad with very little language skills, or you just don't have the time in your schedule or the money necessarily to purchase the flight and the hotels and wherever you're going to stay when you go abroad and all the adventures. This is a way to have a very condensed, short immersion program, but it's very effective. And so I also think that this is a really good option for some of you out there. Again, it's a little bit awkward showing up to a community, not being able to speak English, not knowing anyone. But like I said, if you really want to get your language to the next level and you don't want to do a university course and Rosetta Stone or another type of software has gotten you to a certain level of fluency and you just can't get past it, I really think that one of these options, going abroad with a university, with an organization, with a job, going alone, or going to an immersion program, a community here in the United States, I think that that is going to be the breakthrough that you need to get you to that high level of fluency where you're starting to see results. And not only are all of these options great for your language acquisition, but just your perspective on the world. You're going to make relationships, you're going to meet people, you're going to learn and grow, and you're going to try new foods, you're going to have new experiences, and that is so exciting to me. And so I hope that you really enjoyed this video. I hope that you learned a lot. I hope that you got inspired to maybe look into going abroad or looking into quitting your job and becoming an au pair somewhere else if the circumstances allow it. If you do have any questions, if you want to know more about any of the organizations or the companies, or if you just need some guidance, maybe you want to partner with a university and you're not even sure which program or which university or which country is best for you, I'd love to help you out. Leave any of your comments below. And lastly, before I finish this video, I did want to add, this past weekend I traveled to Miami for a friend's wedding, and I talk about traveling abroad and working on your language skills, and I mostly talked about, traveling abroad, but you also could look into an option of staying here in the US that's not an immersion program. But for me, I speak Spanish and Portuguese. I went to Miami and I used more Spanish than I've used in the last 6 months. I got to eat the most authentic Cuban food that I have ever ate in my whole life. And I got freshly squeezed mango juice, just like I did in Venezuela and Brazil. Like, you can't get that anywhere else in the States. And so I would encourage you too, if you do want to work on your language skills, but you can't go abroad, you can't commit to an immersion program. Let's say you only have a long weekend or a couple of days to go somewhere. I would encourage you to try and look up local communities or places in the US or Canada that you could go and still work on your language skills. Let's say you're studying French. You could go to Montreal or Quebec and work on your French there. Let's say you're studying Spanish. You could go to Miami or Southern California. Let's say you want to learn Portuguese. I bet you didn't know that there's actually a pretty decent sized community of Brazilians and Portuguese people living in Boston, Massachusetts. You could go there. Let's say you're learning Chinese. You could go to Chinatown in New York City and speak there. My whole point in saying this, and my whole point of this video, is at some point, even if you're learning a language through a university, which I highly recommend, especially for a beginner. But even if you're learning a language through a university, at some point you're going to have to put yourself out there, and you're going to have to actively look for opportunities to use the knowledge that you have in your head. And the best way to do that is by practicing, by speaking, by communicating with people that speak that language. And so even if you can't even afford a trip to Miami or Quebec or Boston, Massachusetts, or let's say you're taking care of someone, a loved one, and you can't leave at all, I'm sure that there are some local opportunities in your community where you are to use your language that you're learning. If it's Spanish, go to a Mexican restaurant and strike up a conversation with the waiter. If it's Korean, go to a local Korean restaurant and strike up a conversation there. If you want to learn Hindi, there's a ton of Indian grocery stores and Indian restaurants around here. There are all sorts of opportunities around you that you might not even know. Go on Facebook and try and find a community or a language group. Or even if you know of one person or have heard of one person in your whole entire city that speaks the language that you're trying to learn, try and get in touch with them. Maybe you could pay them $20 for a half an hour of language conversation. Try and seek out these opportunities, because if you just stay in the comfort of your daily life and of the bubble of your life, you're not going to be able to break through that barrier and really reach that level of fluency. So like I said, I hope that you like this video. I'm really excited talking about this stuff. I'm really passionate about it. And so if you have any questions, if you want more resources or more information, feel free to leave a comment below. I might even post some of the links and some of the organizations that I found for you to have more information. But feel free, ask me anything. I'd love to continue talking about this. And if by chance you want to see my pictures from Miami from last weekend, go ahead and follow me on Instagram. It's Life with Casey. I'll have the link in the description below. Thank you all for watching, and get ready for part 4 of my How to Learn a Language series, which is going to be self-initiated learning. That's the next video to come. So subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you soon.